the book of Ruth is the history or the account, really, of the family of Elimelech and Naomi. And Elimelech and Naomi, they were from the town of Bethlehem. We can read the beginning here. And when there was a famine, they traveled to Moab. And there Elimelech, as well as Naomi's 2 sons, died. The sons, though, had married 2 Moabite women. And the Moabites were not Israelites. And they were pagans. They worshiped false gods. We're going to see that in the text here. And their names are Orpah and Ruth. So I want to read what the Bible says about these women. We're going to look in chapter 1. We'll just kind of pick out some verses as we go through. We won't read large sections of the book. But in Ruth chapter 1, let's look at verse 8, and then we'll skip down to verses 14 through 16. So what happens is Naomi's husband has died. Her 2 sons have died. So it's just the 3 women. And Naomi says, well, I'm going to go back to my people. Okay? I'm going to go back where I have family. And initially, both daughters decide to go with her. Now let's pick up here in verse 8. It says, and Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with thee, as ye have dealt with the dead and with me. So what Naomi is saying here is she's saying, look, daughter-in-laws, you've shown love, have been good to me, but I want you to go to your place where you're going to be taken care of, or you're going to be provided for, and I'll ask for God's blessing upon you. She pronounces a blessing on them from God and says, look, the Lord, Jehovah God, all capital letters on the Lord there, so we know this is saying, my God, my God bless thee, because you have dealt kindly with my sons who are dead and with me. Verse 14, and they lifted up their voice. So she's telling them to go. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law. Ruth clave unto her. Okay, so here, what happens is Orpah relents. She says, okay. Right, there's discussion. She does not want to leave initially. But then what we're reading here in verse 14 is she says, okay, fine, I'll go. Not in angst, not in anger, but she says, yeah, that probably would be best. And so she determines to leave in verse 14. But Ruth cleaves unto her. She says, I'm not letting you go. Verse 15, and she said, behold, thy sister-in-law, this is Naomi speaking, behold, thy sister-in-law has gone back unto her people. But notice this phrase, and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. So Naomi, she says, hey, Orpah has gone back. She's gone back to her people. I told her this would probably be best for her. She's gone back. And she's gone back to her gods. Why don't you go back as well? And listen to Ruth's response. And Ruth said, entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go. And where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God, my God. Now remember, part of what she said, convincing her to go back, is Orpah went back. She went to her gods. You can go. This would probably be best. You'll be taken care of. And she says, no, your people are going to be my people now, and your God, my God. Verse 17, where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more, if aught but death part thee and me. I think what we're seeing here is that Ruth was converted. Orpah goes and she returns back to her God. She returns back to her people. She returns to her gods. And Ruth says, no, I'm not going to go. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to stay with you. And she says, look, your God will be my God. And in case there's any doubt, she even names our God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Says, the Lord do so to me. The Lord, again, all capital letters. She is saying, this God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Right? If I leave you and I don't go with you, then he can kill me as well. If aught but death part thee and me. Dealing with the transmitter, try different things here. It's not being successful. I'll just pop it back in there. So she puts her life into the hands of God. She trusts that God will take care of her. Rather than return to the men of Moab to be provided for, rather than going back to the pagan gods she used to serve, she trusts God. She's saying, look, Jehovah can kill me if I leave you before you die. She puts her faith in God. She puts her end result, whatever is going to happen, she says, look, it's in God's hands. I trust God. She's turning to the Lord, putting her fate in his hands. Where Orpah returns to the false gods, showing that, look, I'm sure that she had accepted the practices of Naomi and Elimelech and her husband while they were married, while they were together. But this was external. She was just doing what she was supposed to do to be a good wife. And so when the time comes and it says, look, you can continue with me, but maybe you'll be provided for better if you go back. She says, okay, fine, I'll go back. You're right. Maybe I will be provided for better. Whereas Ruth says, no. I know that the Lord can take care of me. I'm going to put my fate into his hands and I'm going to go with you. He is my God. Orpah had not recognized who God really is, and by extension, I would say what his promised Messiah would come to do. So the story goes on. Ruth is accepted by the people of Bethlehem, and if you know the story of Ruth, you know that she meets a man named Boaz. And Boaz is Naomi's relative. Now, in the nation of Israel, the expectation was that if a man died, leaving behind a widow, particularly with no children, his brother was to take in the widow, provide for her, and to bring children up in his brother's name. This is a way to, I believe that this is a way that God instituted to protect widows, to protect and extend the lineages of the people of Israel, to provide for their growth in the land. And it's something that's known as levirate marriage. So it's not just, you can look this up and you can find different countries that have similar laws. But God ordained this in Israel and said, look, I want the widows protected. I want them taken care of. I don't want them cast aside. We can look in the New Testament even and see, hey, there's widows who are widows indeed that should be taken care of who don't have family. Right? If they don't have family, then the church steps in and the church says, hey, how can we help? How can we be a part of taking care of you? And this was the role that the brother would take. And you can see that in the discussion in chapter 1. If you read chapter 1 fully, you can see this discussion between Naomi and Ruth and Orpah where talking about, Naomi says, look, there's no more sons. What, are you going to wait until I go back to Israel and maybe I get married again and maybe there's more? Are you going to wait for them to grow up to take care of you? Go back and find somebody to take care of you. This is part of her argument. But we see that with Boaz, this goes beyond just brothers. The expectation goes to extended families as well, as Boaz is a near relative to redeem the property and the family name. But we can find that there's another man who is more closely related to Naomi than he is, and he has to speak to him first. Okay, so we're going to see that in the later chapters here. But notice how Boaz refers to Ruth. When they meet, of course, they meet where she goes and she's gathering the leftover grain that Israel is to leave behind. And he notices her, he takes notice. But look in chapter 2 and verse 12. Boaz, he's speaking to her, and she notices in verse 10, she says, look, I found grace in thine eyes. I'm a stranger. I'm not from here. You can tell I'm not a Hebrew. And he goes on, he speaks about what he had heard, how she had taken care of Naomi. But verse 12 of Ruth chapter 2, the Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. So here in his statement to Ruth, Boaz's statement to Ruth, he's acknowledging that Ruth had put her faith, her trust in God. He's saying, look, you came under the protection, under the wings of God, and you came to trust his protection. You are trusting God. Her hope for deliverance or protection, it was God. And so we see here in Ruth this another clear example of those who came into the physical people of Israel and receive the blessing of God by faith, even if they weren't of the nation of Israel physically, by descent. There we go. I told you, 60% brain function. And Naomi recognizes that this meeting with Boaz is by the direction of God, by the providence of God. Look at verse 20 of chapter 2. So Ruth gets back to the house wherever they're staying, and she speaks to Naomi. And in verse 20, and Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. And Naomi said unto her, The man is near of kin unto us, one of our next kinsmen. So she recognizes, hey, this is God taking care of us. This is God's providence. This is of the Lord. And he is in line. He may choose to be the kinsman that redeems our inheritance, our family. And then in chapter 3, Ruth reveals to Boaz, we won't go into it a lot, but that he is her near kinsman. And she comes to him humbly, showing her desire to come into his house, to be counted as part of his family, and to be committed to him in marriage, in the covenant of marriage. Ruth chapter 3 and verse 9. Verse 9, and Naomi has kind of given her instructions and what does the process look like if you want to let him know that hey, would you consider taking me in as the near kinsman and doing one of these marriages, right? Taking care of my family. And so Naomi gives this instruction, and look at verse 9 of Ruth chapter 3. And he said, Who art thou? This is Boaz speaking to Ruth. And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Notice how she refers to herself. She doesn't come in demanding. She doesn't come in saying, this is owed. You know what the law says. Hey, you got to sort this out. No, she comes in and says, look, I'm your servant here. And not, she's just presenting herself humbly to him. And she says, Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. The expression, it's an idiomatic expression here, saying, hey, spread thy skirt over thy handmaid. Hey, just put your covering, right? Accept me, receive me as your wife. Take me into your household. In chapter 4 then, Boaz, he says, hey, I'd be willing to do that. I'm interested. And in chapter 4, Boaz, he goes to the other kinsman that we mentioned. And while that man is willing to purchase back the property, so there are two parts to this. He comes and he presents to him and says, hey, there's a parcel of land that Elimelech owned. And Naomi is back from Moab. And so the kinsmen have the first opportunity here to purchase this from her. And that way she can be taken care of. She can have money to provide. Okay, so if you, as the closest kinsman, Boaz is saying to this unnamed kinsman, he says, if you would like to purchase the land, you have the first right. And he goes, well, yeah, I could do that. And he agrees to it with the property. But then Boaz reveals to him, and when the man realizes that part of the kinsman redemption would include a wife as well, Ruth, well, then he says that Boaz could redeem the property and that family inheritance instead. Look at chapter 4, verses 3 through 6, kind of details this. So Boaz, he approaches the kinsman here, the other kinsman who's closer to Naomi than him. And he said unto the kinsman, Naomi, that has come again out of the country of Moab, selleth a parcel of land, which was our brother Elimelech's. Now, brother just means family in this case. We don't necessarily know the specific relationship. And I thought to advertise thee, saying, Buy it before the inhabitants and before the elders of my people. Now this, he means, hey, in front of people. Not before them, like, get ahead in line. But in front of people. This is a commitment that is made in front of the people of the land. Because of what you're doing, the redemption that is taking place. If thou wilt redeem it, redeem it. But if thou wilt not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know. For there is none to redeem it beside thee, and I am after thee. And he said, this is the other man, I will redeem it. Then said Boaz, here he says, oh, by the way. Then said Boaz, what day thou buyest the field of the hand of Naomi, thou must buy it also of Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. So again, we're seeing this practice that's very foreign to us, but at the time this is how God providentially established it as laws. You're going to take care of widows. You're not just going to let them starve to death, okay? And so he says, hey, by the way, this redemption, it's a package deal. And it's not just the property. Verse 6, and the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar mine own inheritance. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. So he says something here. He says, look, I can't redeem it lest I mar mine own inheritance. And there's different ways to maybe understand what he's saying there. A few different ways that people have taken that or think maybe what he's referring to is perhaps he had a family already. He had his own inheritance already. And he didn't want to create conflict. He didn't want to mar his family, damage his family by bringing in his relative's wife and starting a family for Ruth's sake. Perhaps when he realized that he was not only purchasing land, maybe another thought could be, hey, here's a land that could earn money back for me, that I could grow crops and I could have that. And so he thought, okay, I can do that. It'd take all our money, it would take everything I have, but at least I could afford that, and then it would help. It would be a help. And maybe he realizes, oh wait, there's a family as well. I can't afford that. Maybe there's literally a sense that just practically speaking, I can't take on that responsibility. The inheritance that I have, it would be damaged, right? What I own, what I take care of, the money that I have, it's going to be damaged by this. And so when he realized that, he recognized he didn't have the finances potentially, whereas in Ruth chapter 2 and verse 1, it calls Boaz a mighty man of wealth. And so then he turns to Boaz and says, look, Boaz, I know that you can not only afford the land, but you can also provide for a family. So you do it. Maybe that's what happened. Perhaps there was a selfish aspect. I've heard people present it that way. There's selfishness here. And he doesn't want to split his descendants' inheritance with another family. I don't think it matters. It's not a particularly vital point because the Bible doesn't spend any time on it. And it's not a part of the main flow of the text. It doesn't help with the narration. All we know is the man says, I can't do it. You can do it. And this is exactly what Boaz was hoping for. So Boaz agrees to be this kinsman who redeems the inheritance for Ruth's sake, to Naomi, where this man could not. But notice that this right of redemption was not Boaz's responsibility here. Right? Boaz wasn't responsible for this. He's not the one who by tradition was expected to pay this price. But still, Boaz, he goes on, he declares his marriage formally before the city, just like he told the other kinsman. He said, hey, go before everybody and let him know. Well, Boaz does this. He comes into this agreement, this covenant agreement of marriage with her before everyone. And he says, okay, this is it. Here's the agreement, right? That's what weddings look like, right? We're coming before everyone. We're coming into an agreement, a covenant before everyone and saying, this is a serious commitment. I'm accepting this. This is what's happening. And this is what he does. But look at verse 14 of Ruth chapter 4. 14, we'll read verses 14 and 15. Ruth 4, 14 and 15. And the women said unto Naomi. So this is, okay, let me back up. I apologize. So he's married to Ruth. He takes her into his house and they start a family. Okay, a child is born. And so the child then, everyone's excited, right? Everybody loves babies. So the baby is born, everybody's excited. And people, they look to Naomi, who hears grandma now, who's holding the baby. And she had gone with Elimelech, and they had left because of famine. Her husband died, her 2 sons died. When she came back to Bethlehem, she even said, look, just call me bitter because things have not gone well for me. And there's a sense of bitterness even towards God there. But now here, the women, they look to Naomi, and this is what they say to her in verse 14, Ruth 4:14. Blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. Now this kinsman she's referring to is the child. God hath not left thee without a kinsman. Verse 15, and he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age, for thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. So here, if we were to look in verse 12, it even refers to this child as a seed. So a seed is born. And what have we seen? All through the beginning books of the Bible, here's this sense that, hey, there's a seed that's coming that's going to make right the problem that was created back in the garden. And we see this language. Well, here's a promised seed. Well, here's a son that's promised. Here's that your seed is promised. And here's another seed that comes. And even some of this language is, this feels like messianic language. And the Bible says that he will be a restorer of life. He'll be famous in Israel. And if you remember, do you guys remember the story of Tamar? We talked about it a little bit. We talked about it briefly. And her twin sons. And the second one comes out first. And that's totally against the human expectation, right? And the second who comes out is the ancestor of Boaz. You can see that in chapter 4 here if you read through that. And this son, or the seed of Ruth 4:12, the child here of Ruth and Boaz, his name is Obed. And he fathers a man by the name of Jesse. And Jesse is the father of David, King David. And Obed here, even in his birth, he is this seed that comes. He is the restorer of life. He is one who is famous in Israel. And he's in the line of Christ. He's in the line of King David, who there's going to be a promise of a seed to David as well. And he is in this, and his birth, his life, in a sense, is a foreshadowing of the work that Jesus would accomplish, restoring life. But what are we to learn through this Bible story? What are some things that we can look at from a very high level and to take away? What purpose can we uncover in the including of this history for us as Christians to read? In Ruth herself, I think we're taught about salvation. We're instructed about salvation. God fully redeems Ruth in this account. She's not only accepted into God's people, when she comes in faith, when she says, look, I'm going to trust God, I'm going to put myself under his protection. She's not only accepted in people, but she even becomes an instrument in the line that God brings his son, Jesus Christ, into flesh through. So here's this woman who's not from the nation, but yet she comes in faith, and God says, hey, despite the fact that you're born in the wrong flesh, in the wrong nation, those are not the things that justify men before me. Right? This is what Paul's been arguing for, particularly in Galatians chapter 3. We're on chapter 4 on Sundays. But in Galatians chapter 3, this is what Paul has been arguing for. Whether Jew or Gentile, male, female, bond, free, all people come to God and they're justified by their faith. Just like Ruth was. And she stands justified before God fully. And God says, not only are you accepted, not only will I take care of you, I have a special purpose for you. I'm going to redeem you beyond what you imagine. Not just enough so that you don't starve to death, but I'm going to make you part of this special, unique line that's going to be recorded centuries later as the line of Christ. She is blessed. She is protected. And she's used in this great way by and for God because she trusted in God's protection and she made Yahweh her God. But what about Boaz? I think Boaz really is perhaps the greater picture. I think the story of Boaz is really why this is here. Boaz is a kinsman redeemer. He is like, right? He is the same as, he is family with Naomi. And so he's able to redeem Ruth and Naomi. He pays the price that others could not pay. He makes a covenant, a promise of redemption. And Ruth doesn't have to do anything to earn it. She just comes humbly. She makes herself Boaz's handmaid, recognizing that she had no claim over him, no authority over him, and rather views herself as his servant. Colossians chapter 1 and verse 14 says that in salvation we have redemption through Christ's blood, even the forgiveness of sins. 1 Peter 1, 18 and 19 says that the saved were not redeemed by riches or money or gold, but rather with the precious blood of Christ. Christ redeems. But what type of redeemer is he? Hebrews chapter 2, verse 11 talks about the fact that we are kin, we are brothers, we are brethren with Christ. Because, as verse 14 of Hebrews 2 says, Christ took part. He took part of what we are. He becomes flesh and blood. He became kinsman to us so that through death he might save us. So Christ is our kinsman who redeems. He is the one who takes on, he took on what we are so that he could redeem us. Christ is the one who receives us when we come humbly to him, recognizing our need, our position, offering ourselves as his servants. And Christ is the one that covenants with us, redeeming us to himself. He didn't have to do it. It wasn't his responsibility, but he chose to. He chose to become our family, to become kinsmen with us so that he could redeem us. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 2, Paul talks about the fact that he espoused the Christians in Corinth to one husband. He says that they would be presented to Christ as a chaste virgin. Like this is kind of mirrored in the way that Boaz even refers to Ruth. In chapter 3 and verse 11, he tells her that all the people know that thou art a virtuous woman, faithful, proper, just as the Christian is to be to Christ. The same way Christ redeems us, Boaz redeemed. The way Ruth came to Boaz and became his wife. We as Christians, we are the bride of Christ. Christ takes on the redemption process and redeems us to himself, and we are unified with him. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25. It says, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. And that whole chapter, of course, that section of the chapter talks about what marriage is supposed to look like. And it says, and you know what? I'm talking about Christ and the church, is what Paul says there. The same way that Boaz gave for Ruth, Christ gave for his bride, the church. Boaz is a picture of Christ. He's the type, the shadow, the image of who Christ will be as our kinsman redeemer. He didn't have to redeem, but he chose to redeem us out of his love. He paid the price, and the church is his bride who he makes a covenant with, just as Boaz received Ruth when she came to him, though he didn't have to, and covenanted with her to make her his bride. So the Bible story of Ruth, we can make applications about love, and we can talk about marriage, and we can talk about care and how we should take care of others and all these different things. But I believe that the Bible story of Ruth demonstrates the love that Christ has for every believer. It's a picture of it, of what Christ would come to do some 11, 12 centuries later. And it's an image of Christ's love for everyone who is made a child of faith, of promise, that he redeems as our kinsman who took on flesh for the purpose of redemption.